This is the Open University.
Welcome back, dear viewers, to a year-end review of 2022, the year of 3 Guilty Biennials and 2 Momus albums. And at the beginning of the year, it's still the end of the COVID period. We're still kind of in that nightmare from which we're trying to awaken. And I'm thinking about zeros and ones.
We're all extremely stressed and extremely exhausted by being literally sick. It's an inconceivable situation where everybody in the world is potentially ill at the moment. It's really, not something one could have imagined 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And it unfortunately is something one might have to project down into the future. So that's another form of the big zero is death. The big zero which waits for us all is death. And, we make little ones in terms of little bits of content to kind of shore ourselves up against death. But we know that they won't survive, that we won't survive our death, although possibly some of our little, how did David Bowie put it, streams of sound. That's all that's left of me is streams of sound.
Streams of sound was what I also used to hold death at bay in 2022, making these 2 albums, Smudger and Isivu.
January, Stop the Body, Disappear, Orchestras, Bartleby, Supervillain, Midnight Sun, Friends, Smudge, The Coffee Professor, Influencer Village, Token Dance, Pesky Blighters, Bergreiser, Peter Grimes, Night Clinic, Friendly World, Smudger from Momus. His best since Athenian, Vivid, Recording.
So early in the year, I make my usual series of videos about the process of recording, and I'm talking about how the world felt early in the year while I was making Smudger, with songs like Bartleby expressing what's come to be known as the Great Resignation.
Somebody who is literally a clerk, a scrivener, someone who writes documents in a big office saying, well, I'd rather not. It's not a big refusal. It's not like going postal and shooting everybody. It's just saying, well, I'd rather not. A very gentle refusal, which I think really resonates now because a lot of us are feeling the futility of work. We've been working from home. We've been sort of, our kind of the possibilities of working have changed, and the rewards of working seem much less when we're threatened by an existential threat, possibly fatal disease.
Benjamin Britten and David Bowie and Brecht, of course, were influences on my writing, and the song Influencer Village updated Bowie's DJ song from Lodger for the Influencer era.
The Influencer is the kind of version of the new DJ. He's got instead of a turntable, he or she has got a selfie camera, and they're taking lots of selfies. God knows I do this too, so I am in my own tiny snail-like way an influencer, a snail influencer.
Supervillain marks the departure of Boris Johnson, and the same spy thriller film soundtrack style as Endarkment back in 2019 marked his arrival.
The films that marked me when I was a child, in the late 60s, things like The Italian Job, you can hear that. You can hear the Quincy Jones, you can hear the John Barry influence, you can hear the Burt Bacharach. So there's a kind of easy listening, but also spy thriller kind of ambience to it.
Stop the Body is basically the 1960s idea that we could liberate ourselves through sexuality, and the refutation of that idea in an era of new Puritanism in which it sometimes seems that we have zero tolerance for human nature itself.
The next song was January, and this returns to Benjamin Britten, who is casting a long shadow across this Smudger record, very unexpectedly. I'm not quite sure why, except that I had a kind of idea of art leader, that I always have wanted to do a kind of very austere piano record in which I did Germanic style art songs, Lieder, chamber pop take on Lieder. So it's very much a German record, being here. So anyway, there's a little film of Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears singing Schubert. Pears singing Schubert, being accompanied by Britten.
Shine
Japan at this point in 2022 is still closed and getting a lot of stick for it, and Seoul seems to be eclipsing Tokyo in the soft power stakes.
People are saying that Japan is losing and damaging its own soft power because it hasn't reopened. It's particularly the ambassadors of Japanese soft power have been people like students wanting to study in Japan, language teachers wanting to teach English in Japan, business people wanting to take Japanese ideas and commercialize them around the world, and also the army of ragged anime and manga fans who are being kept out currently. So they've started letting back in some of these students and business people, but still no sign of tourists being let back in. And some people are saying, well, it's too late, and we now sense a rejection from Japan. We're no longer going to be your ambassadors worldwide. We're no longer going to help you spread your soft power.
March finds me back in Paris, celebrating the city's global diversity and the bourgeois bohemian flaneur lifestyle of its cafes.
Like all the best world cities, Paris is a microcosm of a lot of different places. Of course, as a result of the colonial experience the French had, but it's a very celebratory microcosm. I think it seems very positive about its ex-colonies and its world citizens, in a way that doesn't really happen so much in Berlin. I think Berlin you have some North Vietnamese in Berlin, you have some displaced parachuted creative class people. This is something that comes up if you look at the idea of the bourgeois bohemian, in David Brooks' account, it actually ties in with Richard Florida's account of the so-called creative class. These are people, it's funny, the cafes in Paris seem to consist a lot of these people who are parachuted in from English-speaking countries in particular. The kind of Parisian cafe which, when I lived here before in the 90s, for instance, there were far fewer of these minimalist third-wave coffee type cafes. And now when you go to these places like Parisian, they are entirely staffed by and customered by English-speaking people. There are other, perhaps newer waves of cafes like Leitze, the Leitze opposite the Jewish Culture Museum in the Marais, for instance, which has just opened, run by Taiwanese who started by selling bubble pearl tea, boba, but tapioca tea, but have sort of now moved into regular coffees. Same thing with Place 82, which is a place we like going to, a South Korean place, down near the Place Morge and the Rue du Mouffetard.
In April, I'm thinking about vintage clothing in Paris.
Vintage clothing, thrifted clothing is all from a different period. And for that reason, it's a kind of poetry, because it either reminds you, if you're old enough to remember the period it's from, reminds you of your youth, or it summons up a world which you've never known, but you know that other people have known it. And that sort of, that distance, the fact that it's not your memories, but kind of borrowed memories from someone else, misremembered, and maybe wrong, certainly wrong, is really interesting to me. That it's much more evocative than, industrial manufactured clothes which are targeted at consumers in the present.
May and June see me coming to terms with the UK, a trip back there and finding a lot to grouse about. This is a slogan I got really sick of. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I did expect to be horrified by and was horrified by. See it, say it, sorted. This is the Stasi-like refrain you hear on every train in the UK. In fact, as you pull out of every single station, they put a little announcement. It always reminds me of when I was a schoolboy. I was sent to church on Sundays to an Episcopalian church, and the minister had an event called Sipsy and Spend, which I thought was a pretty stupid title for a kind of bake sale, essentially, because you would be drinking something and then you'd see things and then you'd spend a penny, presumably. I don't know. It sounds like you were going to piss away the tea you'd been drinking earlier. Here, this is equally a ludicrous slogan. See it, say it, sorted. This is the Stasi-like Kleip slogan in which you're supposed to observe your fellow passengers. And if you see anything that doesn't look right, as they put it, you're supposed to text a number, the British Transport Police number, and they will sort it. Sorted, of course, is a bit of a drug term. You're sorted for ease and whiz, famously. This advert is creepy because it says, if you see somebody seeing the fact that he's being seen or she's being seen. This is somebody who's being surveyed by video in a station, pretending to take a portrait of a friend, but actually taking a picture of the security arrangements of the cameras. Are they checking security? Please report any unattended items or suspicious activity to a member of staff immediately. We'll sort it. I don't know. This would not happen in Germany because, of course, people remember the Stasi. They remember when this system of checking up on your neighbours and reporting anonymously on your neighbours was widely practiced in East Germany and led to all sorts of abuses because people who hated their neighbours, people who hated anyone else for whatever reason, could simply clype them up to the authorities and get them in huge trouble. Really unpleasant, bringing out the worst of humanity, let's say.
In July, I report on visits to two guilty biennials, Venice and Documenta in Kassel. Amongst a lot of artwork designed to both produce and reduce guilt, I liked this confessional song by Diego Marcon.
I ought to say, now that it's done, I took the life of my little son.
Later in July, I'm thinking about Herbert Marcuse's idea of repressive desublimation.
Berlin is a very relaxed city. It's very hedonistic in the ways that possibly Herbert Marcuse discusses in One Dimensional Man, this term repressive desublimation, which kind of goes along. It's a more Freudian take on repressive tolerance. Marcuse's idea of repressive tolerance is that there's a kind of sham democracy going on where the state appears to tolerate, appears to be guided by the people in democratic forms. You know, you can vote for the leaders rather than simply being led by the leaders. But it's a kind of illusory, according to Marcuse, it's kind of illusory choice or series of choices in which you're simply ticking things which are going to happen anyway. You know, could you see any space between the Tory candidates of both backing Brexit, the Labour Party's also backing Brexit? You know, there's very little actual oxygen in the choices. But so repressive desublimation is a much more cultural and complex idea that Marcuse has about how when we're asked to enjoy ourselves, it's really a way to, reconcile us to the existing order.
August sees me summering in Provence with my girlfriend's family, glimpsing philosopher-footballer Eric Cantona and the ghost of Jean Cocteau.
Yes, not a particularly glamorous town. I think the next one along is it's called Saint-Jean something, is the glamorous one, where apparently Charlotte Gainsbourg has a house and was there in residence while we were there. We didn't see her. We did see Cantona from the car. I didn't wave at him. I'm not a huge Cantona fan. Apparently Liam Gallagher is, though, because Cantona appears as the king in a Liam Gallagher video. Somebody I am a big fan of, though, is this guy Jean Cocteau, who in his last film is kind of self-requiem, self-eulogy, elegy rather, not eulogy. It's easy to get those mixed up, isn't it? Incarnated a character in a location which I suddenly recognized because we went to this place. There's a fortress on a hill, and next to it is this old stone quarry, and I immediately recognized it as the place which I'd used in my video Masks of Bedco, where Cocteau's walking down a road in the countryside, and he sees a man, or he sees a horse, a large, tall, black figure in the guise of a horse walking, and he follows him to a gypsy encampment. And this was all very resonant because my mother-in-law, my girlfriend's mother anyway, is a gypsy, and although there wasn't a gypsy camp in this old stone quarry, what there is now is this amazing son et lumière display, sound and light, amazing video projections, very spectacular because you're in this cavernous space, labyrinthine and cavernous, and then you get these projections which transform the space. I loved it. I loved this display.
In September, I'm back at work on music, working on what at first I think will be an EP called Safetyism, inspired by the UK trip, but which turns into the Isivu LP.
I have pages of notes for lyrical ideas and write down things that other people have said, like, for instance, if you suspect me, suspect the best of me. I think I saw that written on a pavement somewhere, or which ends up in the song lyric. If you go to bed with an itchy arse, you wake up with a stinky finger. Very good advice.
The recording continues through October with a shift to the themes of identity, politics, gender and orientation.
Let's take the childish self-assertion of I am whatever I say I am, including my gender, my orientation, all the rest of it. Let's take that, because I'm not sure if I believe that. I think of course we can say what we are and people can and should respect that statement, but we can't control how other people perceive us. None of us have the control over either our avatars online or our, the effect we have in the world, out there in the real world, to determine how other people perceive us. Of course, it's a question of good manners that we go along with other people's self-projections, but just like art, the intentional fallacy in art says that the author's intentions, what I'm saying now are my intentions, actually don't matter that much, because it's what you take from the songs that really matters. So some people from this song, and it's the same with the intentional fallacy of identity, is that that my views as the individual involved of who I am are the only thing that matters. Of course they're not. It's an act of collaboration between the projector of those avatars and the consumer of those avatars, just as it is in art.
November sees in Paris the all-important Fête de la Poire, the Festival of the Pear, and I'm wondering what kind of sleeve to give my new album.
Fête de la Poire, the Festival of the Pear. And this was outside of just a Naturalia, which is a Whole Foods store, again in the 13th arrondissement. But I love the lettering on that. It's just so... I couldn't do that. I worked for hours trying to make a kind of typography based on this, and I couldn't do it with the same kind of charming randomness. I was going to say Momus Isivu in this typography. I should have gone. I was actually going to go back to the store and ask the person who does the lettering on the blackboard to do lettering saying Momus Isivu in that style.
Well, the cover ended up quite different and featured Benny Hill.
Isivu by Momus.
Hello, I'm Momus and I've got a new album out. It's called Isivu.
Available worldwide, Isivu by Momus. The new album on Dada.com.
Isivu.
My pretty little monkey.
So that's pretty much us up to date, and I hope you have a great festivities season, and see you again in 2023.
Here is no continuing city.
Here is no abiding stay.
Ill the wind,
Ill the time.
uncertain the prophet,
Certain the danger.
Oh, late, late is the time.
Late,
Too
late,
late.
and rotten the year.
Evil the wind, and bitter the sea, and grey the sky. Grey, grey.
A doom on the house.
A doom on yourself. A doom on the world.
Open University.